compounded by what has happened in our past. Now, just to point out that the kinds of conflict that we are seeing around mining now are not unique to South Africa. These types of conflicts are taking place all around the world, and what this particular graph does is it breaks down the types of, or the categories of conflict that are around social and cultural change, around economic change, around environmental change, and the process of change itself with the relationships between mining companies and the communities, and also the incidents of when those relationships actually break down into open conflict. And what this data says is that most of these conflicts are triggered around the environmental impacts of mining, i.e. pollution, competition for environmental resources, and the second highest area here is around the economic change and issues around the distribution of benefits. Now, if one were to do a study like that for South Africa, it would be interesting to see whether we have the same profile as we see in this paper. But just to conclude then, the MPDRA focused on meaningful participation, mainly of black South Africans, in the mineral sector. Clearly, our argument is that the trade-offs that are typically associated with mining were not anticipated. And in not anticipating those trade-offs, and they are associated with the fact that mining appears to be a short-term activity that doesn't have any long-term impacts on land choices, but that is not the case, that it has enormous impacts for communities who are displaced and who are affected by immigration, with all the other consequences that I've already mentioned, that there is skewed distribution of impacts and benefits, and that has significant social consequences. And lastly, that there are long-term impacts on water resources and arable land, and these are all underappreciated in the MPDRA as it stands. And as I started off in the beginning, if these considerations were fundamental to the design of the MPDRA, we would be looking at provisions in the Act that considered how we might mitigate these effects and how we might possibly avoid them in certain areas that are critical for other land use and for other amenities within the country. So, our conclusion then is that it really is time that we reevaluate the MPDRA. It has tried to increase access to the benefits from mining, and ironically, it has had the most severe impact on communities and people who would have expected to have benefited from democracy in the country. Thank you.
So thank you, May, Ingrid and Joshua for that presentation, a model of clarity and also discipline as well with timing. And I should have said actually that this was the second in our breakfast seminar series where we're looking at the relationship between mining methods and society. So I think it follows on very, very well from Caddy Forrest's presentation on the Marikana Commission last week. I said at the beginning that we would just start with any questions of clarification. Are there any particular questions that you have about some of the terms that have been used or some of the data which has been used? If we could just have those kinds of questions first, just so everyone is clear where we are. Yes? I'm sorry, could I just ask as well that you say who you are?
Okay. I'm Lauren Craven, I'm from NUMSA. My question is, there was no mention of the Amendment Act, the MPRDA Amendment Act. I'm just wondering whether the study will, because it's been a huge problem with the Amendment Act. There's some other things I want to say, but that's my clarification.
Okay, thanks, Norma. Any other more sort of technical nature?
My name is Sobabile. I'm also based in Swap. My question goes to Ingrid. I didn't quite get what those colors represented in your map in terms of ownership. Who owns what and to what extent now?
Okay.
Thanks. And I'll just say if we respond to any others about the terminology? Yes.
Hi, I just wanted you to clarify the difference between land mines and land projects. What exactly is the difference.
Great, okay. And I have one as well. So there's a distinction between projects and mines. I wasn't sure about that either. And also as well, I just wondered if you could explain, maybe particularly Joshua, Ingrid, and maybe Oliver, in the way that you do your graphs and in the way that you do your maps, what actually counts as a mine? For example, Anglo Platinum have mining operations all across the Platinum Belt, whereas Longmen only has one operational mining operation concentrated in one place. So how do you distinguish what actually counts as a mine? So if we could have those responses first, please.
Maybe I can just answer one on the colours. So the different colours are showing are different ownership. And there is another table, which I didn't put up because it's very clear, listing what colours belong to what mines. And really what we wanted to illustrate is how the ownership of the mines in the coal sector have changed between 2001 and now. Does that answer your question? So I can give you the keys to say which colour belongs to.
Would you say, in terms of the MPRDA, the ownership structure, which is one of the key areas the MPRDA Act wanted to address, would you say that the colours...
Yes, so I would say that the MPRDA has been successful in changing mine ownership.
Okay.
Yes. And do you want to talk to?
Thank you. Yeah, it's very complex, and I must congratulate these three authors because they're mining a very complex pattern of ownership and issues which go back more than a century or more. To answer that question, the way in which these maps have evolved since 1986, when I started, this is the 11th edition of this map. And I must say that I've never been able to get the DMR to actively participate in the production of these maps, or purchase them, or support their development. It's been entirely my personal activity. So we're dealing with as May pointed out, a very complex history, and the effect of the new Act has resulted in many mining companies having to make deals with existing mining companies. That's the first thing. So you have a lot of joint ventures going on. And then on top of that, you have a large number of BE companies coming in, very often underfunded, and then also having to go and find, sometimes, as some of our politicians call it, white capital, to help them. So there's this tension continuously developing and continuing because of the nature of the Act, which makes it impossible for you to sit like the Beers have done in the history of South Africa's diamond industry, sit on a prospect that they've owned. They own the mineral rights for 30 years, 40 years in some cases, because it wasn't viable. They've now pushed the boundaries and you have to start exploring. And as a result, you have the consequences that you have seen here, and underfunding. And my biggest concern about this whole process is that the long-term cumulative impacts have never really been understood or built into the financial models of these mines.
Thanks, Oliver. I'm just going to pick up on the discussion around what counts as mines. And well, I think I'm going to ask Oliver to pick up on that. But essentially, we've looked at mining visas. So we haven't taken Anglo American as one mine. It's the different parcels of land that Anglo American is mining. And Longmen might have a large mine, but it's a consolidated lease. Just to respond to the question around the Amendment Act, yes, we haven't specifically dealt with the Amendment Act, partly because of the issue of timing, but also on a cursory reading of that Act, it still doesn't address the fundamental issues. So it's still driving issues of ownership and tying ownership to benefits. It tags on, in forms of charters, in improving the charters and so on, the issues related to the environment and to social change. And our argument which is fundamental to this paper, is that those issues need to be taken into account in the actual design of the Act itself. And that by essentially leaving these issues to be resolved at community level between mining communities and mines themselves will not actually arrive at solutions that are at all able to address the problem and the scale of the problem, and particularly the cumulative effects that Oliver has referred to.
The question was to do with the different parcels of land that you see. Ingrid asked me to produce the map in two forms, one without differentiation of ownership and the other with differentiation of ownership. Just using that Lonmin example, because poor old Lonmin keeps getting hammered from all directions, but they owned that land many years ago, and they turned that land north of Johannesburg into a mine. In a similar way, so did Impala and all the other big mining companies in the platinum mining area. What you've seen now, which is also reflected on one of the maps that they were going to use, is how new upcoming companies, largely theoretically BEE, have started to come into the play there, and then specifically in the Mpumalanga area, and of course also if you go up into the Limpopo region, there are very large areas that are under exploration rights. So we have to distinguish between exploration rights and mining rights. The exploration right may or may not turn out to be a mine. It's a big process and many years of struggle to get exploration through to a mine. And there are lots of regulatory issues as well, and those are legendary. So that's the distinction. We at my company are only able to, the way we put this map together is to speak to the companies themselves. And if we can't find those companies, and a lot of the very small BE companies are here from presentation at meetings. I didn't even know they existed. And the DMR sometimes can't tell me that they're, where they are, because it's also fractionated throughout the regions. And there is this dysfunction. So trying to find, whereas you can go to Namibia, you can go to Botswana, and you can go to the central repository of information, and you can actually get detailed information on every single parcel of mining land. In those countries, you can't do it here yet without a great deal of effort.
I just wanted to add something to, excuse me, what Oliver was saying. So in the sort of genealogy of this paper, before we started working with Oliver, we had initially approached the DMR. And the DMR, as Oliver mentioned, has long lists of all of the mines, quote unquote, operator mines, let's say, we won't say operating. And in all of our contact with them, they kept insisting this is not an actual measurement of actual mining activities. These are just the mines and the companies that we have on the books, right? So it's extremely difficult, in fact, as Oliver has said, to try to get an accurate picture not only of who has the permit to do what where, but what is actually happening. And I'm not sure that's entirely unique to South Africa. So part of what these graphs and these maps are trying to do is trying to sort of, with all the limitations that we have, create a relatively coherent story with data that's less than adequate in some cases. And that's partly why Oliver's maps and Oliver's data are so had the opportunity and the resources to contact individual companies precisely because you can't get that data from the DMR itself.
Perhaps just to build on the conversation that the conversation point that Joshua has introduced, is that the mining exploration processes start triggering social change and social dynamics and expectations and concerns about mining on land. So while those mining aren't necessarily translating to environmental impacts, but the social forces then start shifting as mining land is explored.
Okay, so thanks very much for those points of clarification and explanation. So we've got about half an hour left, and we can broaden it out more into a wider conversation. And I see amongst us we have representatives from some of the mining affected communities, actually including in the Impala mining area, in the Bafokeng. I'm not sure what you would say about Impala's land ownership there. We have representatives from the mining industry. We have a number of researchers who are working on mining. We have representatives from the unions. We have a number of students who I expect want to enter the mining industry. So it should make for a very, very good conversation. I think the way we'll do it, if you're happy, panel, is we'll take 3 questions at a time. We'll field 3 questions at a time, and then you can respond to those, and let's see how many rounds we can have. What I would like to ask, please, is that you keep your question or your contribution as disciplined as the panel did with their presentation in terms of time and clarity, and also as well that you begin by saying who you are and where you're from and what your affiliation is, because then we will really understand how the conversation is developing in the room. So I've already seen 3 hands, and in the order I've seen them is one at the back there, one at the front there, and then Norma, and then Kelly and Somobila. I'll see you for the next round. Thank you. So if you'd like to begin, please. And if you could also stand up and project your voice. And say your voice.
Thank you, Chairperson. My name is Gregory Moran from the Police Department here. My question is...
In fact, maybe, sorry, we'll use a roving mic for this, so everyone can hear it.
My name is Gregory Moran from the Police Department at Beth University. And my current 10 questions are directed to the entire plenary. Anyone can take it or add after everyone has finished. Let me start by saying, if I contribution that the mining sector in South Africa, you have done good things and bad things in this country history. I hope you will agree with me. And for instance, the migrant labor system, whereby the ex-government and the mining companies have benefited a lot, in which some families of those mining workers were destroyed. You know, that's one of the good things and the bad things. Some of the good things that the mining sector in this country have done. It was the biggest employer of people in this country, and contributing a lot to the GDP of the country, and also to evaluate our land against other foreign currencies, dollar, and so forth. So now coming to the questions that is posed to the plenary. The question is the act that we are talking about, you know, especially the last speaker, social conflict. Does it stipulate a time frame out of 20, 15, 30 years in time, the mining sector to be controlled by the state, who must control, or the black people that were excluded in the controlling of the mining sector? Also, public policies must they control it in 2 years' time, 2 years to come, years to come, you know? Does it state that? Because some of the imbalances that were created by the previous system are still huge in this country. It's one of the countries in the world, or the country in the world, that's got some huge inequalities, you know? So to close those inequalities, because without no doubt, it's not debatable that the mining sector in this country is still the pillar, heart, and soul of the economy of this country up until this day. You see, so I think the plenary will add what try to answer what I told to them, and I think that's all I can say. You know, thank you.
Thanks very much. Okay, so Makani is now bringing you the microphone. And please remember to say who you are and your affiliation.
Okay, my name is Potlala. I lecture in the School of Mine Engineering at Wits. My question is that, yes, May talks about the use of land as a trade-off. But again, if you look at your maps, to say there has been an increase in the number of mines in the coal industry, how much does that mean? Because probably we have about 10 mines in South Africa, which are mainly Eskom mines, which are in excess of about 15 million tons per annum production. And obviously the junior miners are producing less. So there has been an increase in mines, but as well you need to look at the production rate. And why I'm saying that, we are aware that mining, it's non-renewable resources. So there are high chances that in this country you're not going to find other big operations like Anglo De Beers they used to have. So again, the footprint, the increase in mining, it might not be, number of mining companies or number of mines might not result in the increase in terms of the land impact of mining in South Africa. Because there has been some bigger operations which probably could be equivalent of 50 mines of small mines of junior mining companies. So that is something which I'll say the paper should do. But again, to say mining, its contribution to South Africa, I'll say if you look at the coal industry, since 2008, not only that we had load shedding because of new generation or capacity from Eskom, but mainly because there was no coal to Eskom power station because of China and India. So therefore, given that 90% of electricity is coal generated, obviously it's not a rocket science to say there had to be an increase, but obviously with those benefits in terms of the economy. So again, the question is to say, we are a developing country, 90% of our energy is coal generated. Therefore, the trade-off of coal mining to land usage as well in terms of its contribution to the economy, because the very same people have benefited because there